Welcome. This is Philip Jareggi with Judicial Action Group and James Christofferson with Judicial Action Group. James is up in D.C. working from home today. And we want to talk with you guys about William Kayatta. He's an Obama nominee to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. He's had his hearing. He'll be coming up for a vote here in just a few days. I'm going to tell you the action item. We'll talk about the reasons why we want you to call and oppose Kayatta, and then we'll come back and talk about the action item again. But the action item is that we want to ask you to call now the Senate Judiciary Committee members and to ask them to vote against Kayatta. Now, there are a number of reasons why. One of the reasons is that from his record, it appears to us, well, the evidence shows that he is a judicial elitist who has advocated for legislating from the bench. James, if you would, tell our friends about what Mr. Kayatta has said about judicial salaries.
Yeah, well, basically, what you're saying about him as a judicial elitist is right on. At a time when Americans across the country are unemployed, Kayatta believes that judicial salaries need to be doubled, that they're not being paid enough, even though they're already being paid as Congress, senators, congressmen, those sorts of things. And what makes that such an elitist position to hold is, I think his own words describe it best, where he says it's because judges are not supposed to be average. They should be the best of us, the brightest of us, the most fair and compassionate of us, essentially implying that senators and congressmen don't need to be as smart, as fair, as compassionate. That judges should just be better.
Yep, and by the way, too, James, it's important. I want folks to know that is an actual quote from Mr. Kayatta. And you can go to our website, judicialactiongroup.com. You'll see the links there where you can download this 2-page research paper with footnotes and everything else that'll help you understand the issues. But yeah, what James just said, that's an actual quote from Mr. Kayatta that's on our one-pager. Here's another quote from Mr. Kayatta. He says, "The current system of linking judicial salaries to congressional salaries makes little sense, and judicial salaries should be linked to the salaries of judges in other countries." So what Mr. Kayatta is saying is not only should judicial salaries not be linked to congressional salaries, because apparently they're so much more compassionate, but judicial salaries in the U.S. ought to be linked to foreign judges. Now, of course, we have a real problem with that as well.
And it really only gets worse from there. I know we keep saying that, but it does. In his desire for this raise in salaries and his desire to detach the pay scale from what we pay our other U.S. government officials, Kayatta believes that judges have the right, the ability, the authority to raise their own salaries. Since Congress refuses to, when Congress is trying to make cuts, when they're dealing with a multi-trillion-dollar deficit, he believes that judges should go ahead and raise their salaries on their own.
Exactly. And of course, the big problem with that is Article 3 of the Constitution gives judges the authority to decide cases. It gives them no authority to spend money, gives them no authority to raise anyone's salaries, much less their own. Here's a quote from Mr. Kayatta. He says, "A case can be made that the Constitution requires a raise in judicial compensation to ameliorate the diminution that has occurred over time as a result of inflation." Now, the Constitution clearly says that judicial salaries cannot be reduced, but it never says that they have to be raised, and certainly it never says that they have to be adjusted to account for inflation. In talking about this, Mr. Kayatta made the point too. He cited a previous case where a court had looked at a request that judicial salaries be increased. The court rejected it outright, said they couldn't do it. Mr. Kayatta says that's what the court did last time, but they could very well reach a different conclusion this time. Well, Mr. Kayatta is dead wrong. They can't reach a different conclusion under the Constitution, and if they ever did, if Mr. Kayatta's view were ever adopted by Kayatta or any other judge, they should be removed from office, plain and simple, because they've exercised legislative power.
Absolutely. The law hasn't changed. It doesn't change by itself, and judges do not have the authority to change it. Only the legislature does. And for Kayatta to suggest that judges can change the law...
Yep. Well, here's what we need to do, James. We're about at the end. I just want to ask folks again, call your senators now, or pardon me, call the members of the Senate Judiciary Committee now. Ask them to vote against William Kayatta. Also, go to our website. You can download the research paper that gives you all the information you need. Thanks, James. Appreciate you guys.